Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we'll be diving into the top 10 countries that hate India in 2025. India, as a growing global power, has encountered significant animosity from various nations, shaped by historical conflicts, political disagreements, and regional rivalries. But what drives this hatred? Why do these countries harbor such resentment toward India? Like, subscribe, and watch till the end to uncover the shocking and emotional reasons behind these hostilities. Let's explore the complex relationships and the factors that have shaped these countries' views of India. Number 10, Afghanistan. Afghanistan's relationship with India has been complicated by geopolitical rivalries and regional influence. While India has historically been a supporter of the Afghan government and its democratic initiatives, Afghanistan's relationship with India has worsened due to India's ties with Pakistan and Pakistan-backed insurgents in the region. The tension between Afghanistan and India escalated after the Taliban's return to power in 2021. India's alignment with U.S. policies in Afghanistan, as well as its support for the Western-backed government, has made Afghanistan see India as an opponent in terms of influence over the region. Afghanistan also feels threatened by India's involvement in Pakistan's internal politics, as India's backing of Kashmir and its relationship with Pakistan complicate matters. Afghanistan views India's military presence and interventions in neighboring countries as interference, particularly its support for anti-Taliban forces. In 2025, Afghanistan's government, deeply influenced by the Taliban, remains cautious of Indian influence, viewing it as a foreign presence that disrupts Afghanistan's sovereignty and regional stability. Number 9, Qatar. Qatar's hostility toward India has been fueled by a mixture of geopolitical and economic interests, particularly relating to the Indian diaspora and regional rivalries. While Qatar has historically been an economic partner of India, tensions have risen due to India's policies toward Muslim minorities and Islamic radicalism. In 2025, Qatar is increasingly critical of India's stance on Kashmir, particularly the revocation of Article 370 in 2019, which gave Kashmir a special status. Qatar, with its large Muslim population, views India's actions in Kashmir as discriminatory and an attack on Islamic sovereignty. Additionally, Qatar's support for Pakistan in regional conflicts has made it view India as an adversary. Pakistan's ties to Qatar, especially in terms of military cooperation and trade agreements, have further strained relations. Qatar perceives India's growing alignment with the West and the U.S. military presence in the region as part of a larger geopolitical rivalry. Emotionally, Qatar sees India's policies as an affront to Islamic unity, and the growing support for Israel by India has exacerbated this sentiment. Qatar's support for Palestinian rights and Muslim causes aligns it against India, which continues to strengthen its relationship with the U.S. and Israel. Number 8, Maldives. The Maldives and India have had a complicated relationship, primarily due to regional influence and security concerns. Historically, India has played a significant role in the Maldives' security, providing military assistance and support during political crises. However, the growing China influence in the Maldives and Indian interventionism in its internal affairs have created tension. In 2025, the Maldives' decision to align itself more closely with China, the China-Maldives Economic Cooperation Agreements, especially in the form of infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative, have increasingly placed the Maldives in a geopolitical rivalry with India. The Indian Ocean region is a key area of competition between India and China, with both nations vying for control over key maritime routes. Maldives' support for China's maritime presence has made India view the island nation's actions as a threat to regional security. Emotionally, the Maldives sees India's economic influence and military interventions as a form of neo-colonialism and interference in its sovereignty. Despite their historical ties, the Maldives has increasingly distanced itself from India, driven by a desire to strengthen ties with China and assert its independence. Number 7, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka and India share a complex history shaped by ethnic conflicts, economic competition, and geopolitical tensions. The most significant source of animosity is the Indian involvement in Sri Lanka's civil war in the 1980s, particularly India's military intervention and support for the Tamil Tiger rebels. Sri Lanka views this as a violation of its sovereignty. In 2025, tensions remain high due to India's support for Tamil separatism and the Indian government's treatment of Tamil Muslims in southern India. Sri Lanka's alignment with China has also created a rift, as China's economic influence in Sri Lanka has expanded, with significant investments in infrastructure through the Belt and Road Initiative. Sri Lanka views India's political influence over its domestic issues, particularly in the Tamil-majority regions, as interference. Sri Lanka's increasing ties with China have also deepened the divide, as India feels threatened by the growing Chinese presence in Sri Lanka. Emotionally, Sri Lanka feels that India's historical dominance and economic pressure have stifled its independence. The Sri Lankan government views India's support for pro-Tamil political movements and its involvement in Sri Lankan affairs as a persistent challenge to its national unity and sovereignty. Number 6. Kosovo. Kosovo's relationship with India has been shaped by India's refusal to recognize Kosovo's independence, which was declared in 2008. Kosovo sees India's stance on its sovereignty as a form of international isolation and political disregard. Despite being a former colony of the British Empire, India has supported Serbia's position on Kosovo, largely due to its own concerns about territorial integrity and secessionist movements. In 2025, Kosovo remains deeply critical of India's diplomatic ties with Serbia and its stance in international forums, where India has blocked Kosovo's membership in organizations like the United Nations. Emotionally, Kosovo views India's refusal to recognize its independence as a betrayal, as India is a country that has long fought for its sovereignty and territorial rights. Kosovo sees India's stance on the issue as a sign of political hypocrisy, given India's own experience with secessionist movements in regions like Kashmir. For Kosovo, India's alliance with Serbia, which has historically sought to suppress Kosovo's independence, remains a significant obstacle to normalizing relations and achieving international recognition. Number 5. Albania. Albania's hostility toward India primarily stems from India's support for Serbia during the Kosovo War and its stance on Albanian independence. Albania, which was one of the first countries to recognize Kosovo's independence, views India's refusal to acknowledge Kosovo's sovereignty as a direct challenge to the Albanian cause. In 2025, Albania remains one of Kosovo's strongest supporters, and it continues to criticize India for its refusal to recognize Kosovo. Albania's growing frustration with India's diplomatic approach has also led to a cooling of relations, as Albania perceives India's stance as a sign of disregard for the Balkans' geopolitical dynamics. Emotionally, Albania feels that India's support for Serbia and its non-recognition of Kosovo have placed it on the wrong side of European geopolitical issues. Albania views India's position as a betrayal of democratic values and self-determination, values that Albania holds dear after its own struggle for sovereignty. For Albania, India's failure to align with the West and its refusal to support Kosovo's independence remain key sources of diplomatic tension. In 2025, Albania continues to push for broader international recognition of Kosovo and works to isolate India diplomatically due to its pro-Serbian stance. Number 4. North Korea. North Korea's hostility toward India is driven by India's alignment with Western powers and its participation in international sanctions against the North Korean regime. India, a member of the United Nations Security Council, has consistently supported sanctions aimed at curbing North Korea's nuclear weapons program. In 2025, North Korea continues to view India as part of the Western bloc that seeks to undermine its sovereignty and security. North Korea sees India's support for nuclear non-proliferation as a direct challenge to its nuclear deterrence policy, which is central to its national defense. Emotionally, North Korea views India's diplomatic actions as hostile and interfering in its sovereign right to develop military capabilities. The country's deep ideological divide with India, which promotes democracy and global cooperation, contrasts sharply with North Korea's totalitarian regime. India's condemnation of North Korea's human rights abuses, particularly the treatment of political prisoners and the lack of freedoms, further fuels tensions. North Korea's mistrust of India remains a significant factor in their adversarial relationship in 2025. Number 3. Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's animosity toward India is primarily linked to India's support for Armenia during the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. India's diplomatic ties with Armenia and its support for the Armenian cause have made Azerbaijan view India as an enemy in the region. In 2025, Azerbaijan still feels betrayed by India's stance on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, especially since India's strong relationship with Armenia has led to a lack of support for Azerbaijan's territorial claims. India's failure to acknowledge Azerbaijan's sovereignty and its ongoing support for Armenian refugees further strains the relationship. Emotionally, Azerbaijan views India's alignment with Armenia as a diplomatic affront, considering it a sign of Western interventionism in a conflict that is deeply tied to Azerbaijani national pride. The long-standing alliance between India and Armenia has made it difficult for Azerbaijan to accept India's position, especially as it continues to fight for control over its disputed territories. In 2025, Azerbaijan sees India's involvement in Armenian diplomacy as part of a larger geopolitical rivalry, especially as India has consistently backed Armenia in international forums, despite Azerbaijan's attempts to gain international recognition for its territorial integrity. Number 2, China. China's opposition to India is deeply rooted in their border disputes, particularly the Sino-Indian War of 1962, and their ongoing conflict over the border regions of Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. Despite both countries being global powers, the rivalry has continued due to territorial disagreements and geopolitical competition. In 2025, the India-China border tensions remain unresolved, and the two countries are competing for influence in Asia and beyond. India's military alliances with the United States and its involvement in regional security pacts have made China feel increasingly isolated and threatened. Emotionally, China views India as a strategic rival in its efforts to dominate Asia. The competing ambitions for regional leadership in South Asia and global influence have fueled ongoing military standoffs and diplomatic challenges. China's resentment toward India has only grown as India's economy has surged, especially as China perceives India as a challenge to its regional supremacy in Asia. China's support for Pakistan and its military buildup in response to India's growing influence only deepens the divide. In 2025, China continues to see India as a competitor for global power, which will shape their rivalry for years to come. Number 1, Pakistan. Pakistan and India have one of the most hostile relationships in the world, primarily due to their territorial dispute over Kashmir and historical conflicts. The partition of India in 1947, which led to the creation of Pakistan, set the stage for decades of hostility. Since then, both countries have fought multiple wars, with the Kashmir region being a focal point of conflict. In 2025, tensions between India and Pakistan remain high, particularly with India's military control over Kashmir and Pakistan's support for Kashmiri separatists. The revocation of Article 370 in 2019 by India, which revoked Kashmir's special status, further escalated hostilities. Emotionally, Pakistan sees India as an occupying force in Kashmir and perceives India's growing military strength as a direct threat to Pakistan's sovereignty. Pakistan's military alliances with countries like China and Turkey have intensified its regional rivalry with India. The nuclear arms race between the two nations adds to the emotional tension, with both nations holding nuclear weapons and strategic military capabilities. Despite occasional peace talks, Pakistan's stance on Kashmir and India's role in regional politics ensure that their animosity remains a defining feature of South Asian geopolitics. These countries' animosity toward India is shaped by territorial disputes, historical conflicts, and geopolitical rivalries. From Kashmir to regional dominance, the reasons for hatred are deeply embedded in their national histories. Like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on global conflicts and international relations. See you next time.